Benjamin Netanyahu was recently interviewed by NBC, and I believe the way in which he views Hamas and the Middle East could further destabilize the region. Take a listen.
We've set a specific target, that is to destroy Hamas's military capabilities and to destroy its governance capabilities over the 2 million people that it holds hostage in Gaza. That is something that we are achieving step by step, and I assure you we'll complete the task. If you want peace, destroy Hamas. If you want security, destroy Hamas. If you want a future for Israel, the Palestinians, the Middle East, destroy Hamas. We're absolutely intent on achieving it. And what I can tell you, Kirsten, is given the extraordinary performance of the Israeli army in the last few days, the last few weeks, we're going to achieve it. We'll do it with as few civilian casualties as we can and with maximum casualties on the Hamas terrorists, which we're achieving day by day, hour by hour. We'll complete the task. Victory.
This characterization of good versus evil harkens back to George W. Bush's characterization of good versus evil during the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq. But I think it misses such an important nuance in understanding both Hamas as well as Israel. And my goal is to hopefully unpack the nuance of Hamas and why it receives some widespread support within Palestine. You see, back in 2006, Palestine actually held elections, and there was an 84-delegate international observer delegation monitoring the elections, and actually it found the elections to be peaceful and well administered. All polling stations closed on time, where voting was extended by the permitted 2 extra hours. The Palestinian Legislative Council holds 132 seats, meaning that 67 is needed for a majority, and Hamas won. Hamas won 74 seats in that election, forming a majority. So the question remains, and perhaps it's not the most comfortable question, but how could Hamas have such wide appeal across all of Palestine for many Palestinians to feel like they can go in and vote for Hamas because they represent them? If in fact Hamas is this evil terrorist group, how could they possibly appeal to the average Palestinian, knowing that those elections in 2006 were well administered and there was no ballot stuffing or intimidation at all? Well, the answer to that is very complicated, but there are a series of both internal and external factors that led up to Hamas winning widespread support to the 2006 elections. Internally, Hamas was routinely characterized as this absolutist ideological party. Its 1988 charter included goals of understanding that the banner of Allah must be on every inch of Palestine. It rejected negotiation and asserted that no solution to the Palestinian problem is possible except through jihad. It also included various conspiracy theories and racist allegations. Some say conservative factions within Hamas led to the boycott of the Palestinian elections in 1996. But by the late 90s, Hamas started changing its tune, and they were becoming more pragmatic in their approach to what they saw as the end result for Palestine. Some argue that Hamas was evolving as this pragmatic movement. It began to agree to short-term ceasefires with Israel through indirect negotiation, and even expressed a willingness to enter into long-term ceasefire or hudna with Israel. This is just my opinion, but I think that within Hamas, perhaps there were people who said, in order for us to reach a wider base of support, we need to stop governing from the extremes. We need to stop thinking that the annihilation of Israel is possible. We need to walk away from the 1988 charter and work towards a pragmatic solution. Otherwise, we're only going to be talking to the extremes. If we want to get people who are disillusioned, let's say with the Palestinian Liberation Organization or Fatah, a secular organization, while still maintaining the self-determination of the Palestinian people, we, quote unquote, we being Hamas, will be the only party that will have self-determination at the core of our principles, and that could set us apart from the other parties and make us have much more widespread support in the West Bank, in Gaza, in so many other areas of Palestine. While this pragmatic shift is happening internally to Hamas, something externally is happening in the environment that makes people more disillusioned to the other parties and the peace process with Israel. And that was the breakdown of the Oslo Accord. The Oslo Accords are a pair of agreements between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, signed in Washington in 1993, and Oslo II signed in Egypt in 1995. They mark the start of the Oslo process, a peace process aimed at achieving a peace treaty based on resolutions 242 and 338 of the UN Security Council, and at fulfilling the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. A core issue of the Oslo Accords was the withdrawal of the Israeli military from Palestinian territories. The main sticking point of the Oslo Accords was that Netanyahu continued construction within existing Israeli settlements and put forward plans for the construction of a new neighborhood in East Jerusalem. By March 1998, none of the withdrawals had occurred. During the Second Intifada in 2002, the Israeli military reoccupied many of the areas previously turned over to Palestinian control. So without knowing the intricacies and all the key players, we can begin to understand how Hamas continues to gain political support within Palestine. You see, if Palestinians go down the road of supporting the PLO and the peace process, it's clear that Israel will not uphold some key elements of the peace process, undermining the self-determination of the Palestinians. That harkens back to some of the more conservative elements within Hamas that says that we cannot work with Israel because they're not in it to understand our self-determination process. At the same time, internally, Hamas is making some small pragmatic changes that is appealing more to a wider base. In fact, the most important ideological change that Hamas made was recognizing the 1967 borders by calling for a temporary two-state solution. Hamas's version of this two-state solution is worded as a temporary measure, defended ideologically through the Islamic concept of hudna, or long-term truce, but it implies an acknowledgement of Israel's long-term existence. This acceptance, if only as a temporary measure, is such a major ideological change for Hamas and something that is not discussed enough. So what are my final thoughts? Well, it's clear that Hamas has widespread political appeal and support. How much support they have after October 7th remains to be seen, but ultimately there are still many Palestinians that gravitate towards Hamas because they are very adamant on self-determination for the Palestinian people, as well as being very critical of any peace process with Israel as well. So if we believe Netanyahu and the only way towards peace and stability is the removal of Hamas, the real question is, what replaces Hamas? There will be some type of political vacuum, power vacuum gap that many Palestinians will now need to gravitate towards either the PLO or Fatah to see if they can actually be the replacement for Hamas. I don't know if that's necessarily possible. What I do think will happen, and this is pretty scary, is more splinter cell extremist groups will break loose and gain more traction as a result of Hamas not being there. Why? Because there are conservative elements within Hamas that have always harkened back to the 1988 charter, and what's happening right now in Gaza further perpetuates that view that you cannot negotiate with Israel because of what their end goals are. So my concern for the future is that completely removing Hamas will further destabilize the region and lead to more extremist splinter cell groups coming about as a result. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I really hope that this helped contextualize everything that's happening in the Middle East.